Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the Midrash portion of Reunion Roadmap. This is David Jones. With me today is Barry Phillips. Shalom, brother.
Shalom, David.
I'm going to jump right into a very pointed question here. Have you ever been talking to someone about, just the wonders of the Torah and just the beauty of it and just, wow, how it just kind of unfolds when you really start searching with the heart of the Father, and they immediately jump and call you a Pharisee?
Why do you want to be a Pharisee and get under bondage, brother? Yeah.
I mean, it seems, well, gee, that's a pretty specific kind of scenario, but that has happened to me. And I'm just wondering if that's been the only, I've been the only one that's happened to. You get excited about the word and what it says, and all of a sudden you're being classified as going to bondage on something. So, like, wait a minute. And so that kind of leaves the idea, why do we have the impression that Pharisee is equated with bondage? And I think something that you brought out as we were just kind of setting up the audio in here from Matthew 23, verse 13, 14, there and there, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, these things, right? And I'm not saying anything against what Yeshua was saying. I mean, he was perfectly valid in what he was saying, but understand, when we see the word Pharisee, it doesn't mean every single person who was a Pharisee. He was talking to the group that was in front of him, and the system as a whole.
Yes, that's an important part.
A lot of the Pharisees, this was like a political party, okay? Not like the political parties we have today, but not that far from it either. So this was a group of people who had an agenda, who had issues, but it doesn't mean that all of them were wrong or all of them were off or all these things. And I was thinking about, okay, so the Pharisees, what did they believe? Well, let's see. They believed in the resurrection of the dead. They believed in angels and demons. They believed in gathering for worship. They believed in having a messianic hope. They believed in a day of judgment. I mean, is this really much different than what we think, really? I think one of the biggest differences that we find is how they were saying, okay, they believed in the Torah and the Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, the writings, all these things that they had. But then they added in the importance of the oral law. And I think that's kind of a big buzzword and a hot button even with us today. Should the oral law be followed? And for me, and this is just my opinion on it, and I guess that's the point of Midrash, right? We can talk about our opinions and get through some things. But I take that the same way that I would take that if I were to go to a bookstore and pick up a reference book or a commentary on a book. If I read a commentary on any book of the Bible, guess what? That's a commentary. I may or may not agree with this person. I may or may not agree with every point. He may have some good points. He may have some points that are way off in left field, but it's a commentary. This is people who have studied and done and do this, and we need to go through that. So when I read something like that, I kind of approach it from that perspective. Scripture, I view as scripture. The things that we have that's been written, it's been canonized for us, it's there. I believe we have what we need to have. But everything else I approach more along the lines of commentary. It's kind of like love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your might, love your neighbor as yourself. The rest of this is commentary.
Yes.
But I think how we approach things is, and then we get on the idea of, well, because this is what I believe, you have to believe it the exact same way. We can get in danger with stuff like that. And I think that's where Yeshua was taking issue. He said, describes the Pharisees. He said that you're doing all these things, but inside you're whitewashed sepulchres. You're full of dead men's bones. But like, if we read through some things that he said you're doing the things that look good. You're doing the things that look right. They have the appearance that it's good, which means it's appearing that these are things we should be doing. But the difference was not the action. The difference was the heart behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of taking a little extended here to kind of set it up. But I think it's important for us to hear what other people have had to say about the scriptures and other things. Now, if we choose to like take this as doctrine and follow, I mean, be careful, okay? But I think it is important that we hear what other people do have to say. What do you think, Barry?
Well, again, from Matthew 23 and the preaching that we have heard over the years about that, it is easily concluded that Yeshua was against all Pharisees and everything about them, that the Pharisees were the bad guys, and they get lumped in, scribes, Sadducees, Pharisees, blah. You don't want to be any one of those. Well, without the Sadducees, you don't have the Kohanim, the priesthood. And there were indeed Pharisees who followed Yeshua. So you can't write all of them off as well. Even Rav Shaul in Philippians 3, he described himself as a Pharisee of the Pharisees. So he did not cease to identify himself as such when he followed Messiah. He was a Pharisee who followed Messiah. And Phariseeism was, to my understanding, David, was initiated as a group who sought to protect the integrity of the Torah while in exile.
Yeah, I mean, Pharisee, the name Pershim means to be set apart.
So Yeshua was not writing off all of those who were Pharisees like any other sect or persuasion of thought pertaining to Scripture. If you want to say denomination, one can get caught up in the system of such and pulled away from what was the initial root and purpose of such a group. The same can be said for Hebraic roots. There are those that had a heart to answer the question, is this all that there is? And began to walk down a path of more self-study than just what they heard sitting in a seat somewhere. And the Ruach gave them questions that were not easily answered. In the search for those answers, their eyes were open to, wait a minute, something's not right here. And this is what I've heard, but this is what the word says, and it's not agreeing. When we get to that place, however, we can get caught up in systems. Well, you have to observe this way or that way, or speak this way or that way, or dress this way or that way. And then next thing you know, we're right back into a system of belief. Another thought here, and don't want to take too much time, but another thought is, if you are one who says, well, I just don't agree with anything about the oral Torah. Well, if you light candles on Shabbat, Erev Shabbat for your meal, that's more from the oral Torah than anything you're going to find written. If you pray with a tallit over your head, if you wear a kippah, if you, you pray a particular prayer, if you're praying Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam hamotzi leka min haaretz before you eat, prescribed prayers, certain mechanics and methodologies of observance, they come from the oral Torah. So, we chided people who still reside where we used to be and tell them, you can't grocery shop the Torah and just walk down the aisle of the Torah and pick and choose which commands you want to keep and leave the rest on the shelf. David, in all legitimacy, haven't we done that with the oral Torah? I don't agree with everything that's in the oral Torah, but and are we grocery shopping it?
There's another
Long pause
thing
for effect.
Yeah. What do I want for dinner? Nope, don't want that. There's another thing we can tie this in with. If we're saying, nope, I am only going to listen to the words that God said to Moses. I'm only going to listen to the words that God said and Moses wrote down, because there's plenty of people, they believe the Torah, but like none of the rest of the Tanakh, just the Torah, Well, even even that's kind of flawed thinking, I'm gonna throw this example out, and I'm gonna ask everyone to kind of not pick up stones yet. It's Deuteronomy, the book Devarim, included in the Torah, the last book of the Torah, the book that when Yeshua was tempted in the wilderness, he quoted exclusively from Torah, mainly in Devarim, right?
Right.
So he was quoting from Devarim, doing all these things. Yeshua, when he was speaking to the people, he said, if you really believed Moses' words, you would believe what I'm telling you, for he wrote of me, right?
Okay.
And I believe, Yeshua, he quoted when he was teaching, he quoted from, all throughout the Tanakh. So I'm not saying he was only in the thing there, but I think part of the heart behind that is that we try to disqualify anyone else that may have a thought that we don't like. Because if we can disqualify them, then we feel we don't have to listen to them. And Moshe was not. I mean, he was included in that. He had many uprisings in the wilderness, Korah being one of the most famous, right?
Okay.
Point here being, the book Devarim starts off, okay, the very first of the book, Devarim. It says, these are the words of Moses.
Yep.
Deuteronomy 1:1. These are the words. Here, look, I'll pull it up really quick, and I'll say, let's look in Hebrew. Ele hadvarim asher davar Moshe. These are the words Moses. Okay. When the book Devarim was given, Moses had already had his last conversation with Yahweh. We find in Numbers, as Numbers is closing out, he goes to the mountain and he says, look, please let me see the land. And Yahweh says, you can see the land. You're not going in it. You're going to go and you're going to, call Joshua. He's going to lead the people into the land. He's going to do this. And we're not going to talk about this again anymore. And that's really the last conversation that we have recorded, the last back and forth that he had with Moshe,
Mm-hmm.
So when Deuteronomy 1 kicks in, it's Moshe going and explaining what the people need to hear before they go into the land. The next generation, the second generation, telling them to have hope and not to make the same mistakes as the first generation. And I emphasize this because down in verse 5, chapter 1, Deuteronomy 1:5, so here they are across the Jordan, the land of Moab. Moshe undertook upon himself to explain the Torah. And breaking in the Hebrew, this is the way it would put. He undertook himself to explain, to expound. The word there is ba'ar, the same word that we would find used for well, ba'er. Ba'ar is the word used there, meaning to engrave something or to explain something, to declare something, to make something plain and clear. So what he's doing is he's taking the Torah and taking all the things that the first generation had experienced firsthand, and he's going to this generation and he is explaining the Torah to them. He's not just saying, this is what Yahweh said and giving them those words. He is actually presenting it in a way to explain to them what was said and why. So this doesn't contradict the Torah. This doesn't contradict what was given, but it does give a little more explanation of things. There are some things in Deuteronomy that we don't see in the other parts of the Torah, and there's not everything that was in the Torah, in the rest of the Torah is in Deuteronomy. But here we have an explanation from Moshe. This is what you were to remember first and foremost when you go into the land. The rest of the things you can work in along the way, but these are the things you need to remember to go into the land. And you can kind of open that up throughout the entire book. But here, what are we going to remember? Yeshua talked about the words of Moshe and said, if you believed him, you believe me. So I think this works both ways. If we really believe what Moshe said, then we should believe the words of Yeshua. If we really want to believe what Yeshua said, then we should believe the words that Moses said too. And that means we can hear from a person what they believe the Torah says.
And that also means we're out of time. Folks, we enjoy your listening-ship. Thank you for comments, questions, and if you'd like to reach us, you can do so at reunionroadmap@benayosefna.com. Until next week, see you later, David.
Yeah, show 'em, brother.